Alright. Good afternoon or good evening, television fans. Big Al here on this Wednesday, May 20th, 2026, and welcome back to episode number 35 of Television Station History. Today we'll be diving in to the vast history of WGN-TV. So with that, let's get right into it. This information is, of course, courtesy of Wikipedia. WGN-TV, Channel 9, is a television station in Chicago, Illinois that serves as the local outlet for the CW. It is owned and operated by the network's majority owner, Nexstar Media Group, sharing common ownership with its radio counterpart, WGN 720 AM, a news, talk, and sports station. WGN-TV's studios are located on West Bradley Place in Chicago's North Center neighborhood. This would make it Chicago's only major commercial television station whose main studio is based outside of the Chicago Loop. The station's transmitter is located at the Sears Tower. Alright, now the specs on WGN-TV Chicago. The station broadcasts on Virtual Channel 9 and RF Digital Channel 19. General on-air brand is WGN9. News brand is WGN News. We'll talk about the sub-channels later. Owner is Nexstar Media Group. License is held by Tribune Media Company. Their sister stations are WGN AM 720 and cable news network News Nation. WGN-TV signed on the air on April 5th, 1948. They did have the WGNA call letters during their construction permit from 1946 until their 1948 sign-on, but it was never used. The station previously aired on VHF Analog Channel 9 from 1948 to 2009. It began as an independent station from 1948 to 1956. Then they were a CBS station from 1948 to 1953. In fact, they were an independent station to start off in 1948. Then they affiliated with CBS from 1948 to 1953. And the defunct Dumont Television Network from 1948 to 1956. They would become a full-time independent from 1956 to 1995. That was their second run as an indie station. They were also affiliated with NTA, that's the NTA Film Network, from 1957 to 1961, and the United Network from 1967. Then it was the Chicago affiliate of the WB from 1995 until 2006. And then their first run as an affiliate of the CW was from 2006 to 2016. It was in 2016 the station would become independent for a third time. And now the station is back with the CW as of 2024. Call sign meaning is founded by the Chicago Tribune, the world's greatest newspaper. That's where they got the WGN call sign from. Licensing authority of WGN-TV is the Federal Communications Commission. Facility ID number is 72115. WGN-TV broadcasts with an effective radiated power of 645 kilowatts. Their transmitter, located on the Sears Tower, is 454 meters or 1,490 feet above average terrain. They operate a translator station in Red Lake, Minnesota on K32MF. And their website is WGN-TV.com. Hi Allison, how's it going? Alright, now to the station's history. The station began broadcasting in 1948 when it was owned by the Chicago Tribune newspaper. WGN-TV became one of the earliest superstations. On November 9, 1978, it became the second U.S. television station to be made available via satellite transmission to cable and direct broadcast satellite subscribers nationwide. The other was, of course, WTBS in Atlanta. The Superstation, which was later renamed WGN America, was converted into a conventional basic cable network in December 2014, enabling it to be added to local cable providers. It was soft relaunched as News Nation in September 2020. WGN-TV was a charter affiliate of the WB and its successor network, the CW. It became an independent station in 2016 and returned to the network in 2024. WGN-TV, WGN Radio, and the now defunct regional cable news channel Chicagoland Television, or CLTV, were the three flagship properties of Tribune Broadcasting until the company's purchase by Nexstar Media Group in 2019. Alright, now we're going into the station's history, starting with the early years, from 1948 to 1956. On September 13, 1946, the Chicago Tribune Company applied to the Federal Communications Commission to build a television station on VHF Channel 9. The FCC awarded the permit on November 8th, after which the group requested to assign WGNA as the station's call sign. By January 1948, the company decided to call the station WGN-TV after WGN, which the Tribune had owned since 1924. The three-letter base call sign served as an initialism for World's Greatest Newspaper, the Tribune's tagline at the time. WGN-TV began test broadcasts on February 1st, 1948, then informally opened on March 6th to broadcast the 1948 Golden Gloves boxing finals from the Chicago Stadium. Regular programming commenced at 7:45 p.m. on April 5th, 1948, with a 2-hour-long special, WGN-TV Salute to Chicago. The station was broadcast from WGN Radio's studios at Tribune Tower's Centennial Building Annex in the Magnificent Mile District. The inaugural broadcasts include dedicatory speeches from Chicago Tribune editor and publisher Robert R. McCormick, Chicago Mayor Martin Kennelly, U.S. Senator Charles W. Brooks, and Governor of Illinois Dwight Green. Performances were led by acts including musician Dick Two-Ton Baker, comedian George Goebel, band leader Robert Trendler, and the WGN Orchestra, which was the station's in-house band. Afterward, a film previewed WGN-TV's initial program offerings. WGN-TV was the second commercial television station in the state of Illinois. Of course, WBKB Channel 4 had launched 2 years earlier. That station is now WBBM-TV Channel 2. Initially, WGN-TV operated from the Chicago Daily News building, and its 586-foot transmitter tower was atop the building. The station originally broadcast from 2 to 6 p.m. and from 7:30 to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. It was initially an independent station and began carrying programming from Dumont and CBS a few months after its launch. On January 11, 1949, WGN-TV began transmitting network programming over a live coaxial feed from New York City, allowing it to carry a regular schedule of CBS and Dumont programs that could be transmitted as they aired in the Eastern Time Zone. WBKB-TV assumed primary rights to CBS programming on September 5, 1949, and as a result, WGN dropped many CBS shows from its schedule. It continued to broadcast programs on WBKB-TV, declined to broadcast, eventually being reduced to CBS's weekday morning soap opera block by 1952. Waddle is in the house. What's up? What's up, Ellie? Yua Xiong. Hi. During its tenure with Dumont, WGN-TV became one of its major production centers. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, several Dumont programs, including The Al Morgan Show, Chicago Symphony, Chicagoland Mystery Players, Music from Chicago, The Music Show, They Stand Accused, This Is Music, Windy City Jamboree, and Down You Go, were produced at WGN-TV's facilities. On January 25, 1950, the WGN stations relocated to the Centennial Building, which was renovated to accommodate production and office facilities for WGN-TV. The facility included one master studio, two auxiliary studios, and a sub-basement studio situated 75 feet below street level. This latter studio would allow WGN-TV and radio and WGN-B to continue broadcast in the event of a nuclear attack in Chicago. In 1953, as part of the United Paramount Theaters merger with the American Broadcasting Company, or ABC, CBS assumed ownership of WBKB-TV through a $6.75 million acquisition designed to allow UPT to acquire ABC-owned WENR-TV Channel 7, in compliance with FCC regulations that forbade common ownership of two television stations within the same market. CBS moved the remainder of its programming to the renamed WBBM-TV, now on Channel 2, leaving Channel 9 exclusively affiliated with the faltering Dumont television network. By 1954, WGN-TV expanded its broadcast schedule to 18 hours a day, running from 6 a.m. to midnight. After McCormick died on April 1, 1955, the ownership of WGN-TV and radio, the Chicago Tribune, and the News Syndicate Company properties were transferred to the McCormick-Patterson Trust, which was assigned to the Robert R. McCormick Tribune Foundation, in the names of the non-familial heirs of McCormick and familial heirs of Patterson. Alright. Next, Independence. This is their second run as an independent station from 1956 to 1995. WGN-TV was no longer affiliated with Dumont when the network ceased operations on August 6, 1956. Because the three remaining commercial broadcast networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, each owned television stations in Chicago, Channel 9 became an independent station by default. Under Executive Vice President and General Manager Ward L. Quall, the station adopted a general entertainment format that became typical of other major market independents, carrying a mix of sitcoms and drama series, feature films, cartoons, and religious programs, as well as locally produced news, public affairs, music, and children's programs. WGN-TV became more reliant on sports programming, led by its broadcasts of Chicago Cubs baseball games and other regional, collegiate, and professional teams. This helped WGN-TV establish itself as an alternative to the market's 3 network-owned stations. After initial struggles to gain enough viewership to attract national advertisers, WGN began turning a profit by October 1957. On January 15, 1956, the station moved its transmitter facilities to a 73-foot tall antenna on the roof of the Prudential Building and increased its ERP from 120 kilowatts to the maximum 316 kilowatts. In March 1957, WGN began carrying programming from the NTA Film Network and served as the network's primary Chicago affiliate, showing the majority of NTA's program offerings. This relationship lasted until National Telefilm Associates discontinued the service in November 1961. On November 8, 1957, after concluding internal tests since late 1956, WGN-TV began broadcasting select programs in color, consisting mostly of syndicated programs. In January 1958, WGN-TV became the second Chicago television station to begin transmitting local programming in color. Channel 9 was also the first television station in the world to use color-capable videotape recording and playback equipment. The first live program on the station to be broadcast in color was Ding Dong School, a music-focused children's program. In 1958, WGN-TV earned a Peabody Award, the only local television station to earn the accolade, for its children's program, The Blue Fairy. On June 27, 1961, the operations of WGN-TV and WGN Radio were relocated to the WGN Mid-America Broadcast Center, now known as WGN Studios, a 2-story, 95,000 square foot complex in Chicago's North Center community. That's the current studios on West Bradley Place. The Broadcast Center, which began hosting some local productions on January 16th of that year, was developed for color broadcasting, allowing the station to broadcast live studio shows and Chicago Cubs and White Sox baseball games in color. It was also designed to provide a safe location to conduct broadcasts in the event of an attack on downtown Chicago. It houses 3 main production sound stages and 2 additional sound stages that were originally used as sound recording studios for WGN Radio. The Tribune Company repurposed the former Centennial Building facility for the newspaper Chicago American, which it used until the newspaper ceased publication in 1974. An adjacent 20,000 square foot single-story building that housed non-production related operations for the WGN stations was annexed to the facility, expanding the complex to 14.4 acres in 1966. Hey Anna, what's going on? How you doing? The Tribune Company gradually expanded its broadcasting unit, of which WGN-TV and Radio served as its flagship station. In 1964, the company started Mid-America Videotape Productions, which later became WGN Continental Productions. The group became known as the Tribune Broadcasting Company in January 1981, but retained the moniker WGN Continental as its de facto business name until 1984, and as the license for WGN-TV and WGN Radio thereafter. In May 1969, the station relocated its transmitter facilities to the 1,360-foot tall west antenna tower of the John Hancock Building. The original Prudential Building transmitter remained in use as an auxiliary facility until that transmitter dish was disassembled in 1984. Stardust, what's going on? WGN-TV was a charter member of the Operation Primetime Syndication Service, a consortium founded in 1976 by Al Massini and a committee of executives with 18 independent stations. This partnership allowed WGN-TV to broadcast miniseries and first-run syndicated programs that were featured on partner stations. Shows including Solid Gold, Star Search, and Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Movies became a more significant part of WGN's schedule during the late 1970s and early 1980s. During this period, depending on whether sports events or specials were scheduled, WGN-TV usually aired 4 daily features, 1 in the morning, and 2 to 3 films per night Monday through Friday, and between 3 and 6 films per day Saturday and Sunday. Among its regular film showcases were WGN Television Presents and Action Theater, a showcase of action and adventure films. In February 1977, the station also began carrying a nightly primetime feature at 8 p.m., replacing syndicated dramas in that time slot. The primetime films were then moved to 7 p.m. in March 1980, and by January of that year, when WGN became the market's second television station to offer a 24-hour schedule, the station began to air black and white theatrical and made-for-TV movies at 1 a.m., along with some syndicated programs. Next up, WGN Goes National, 1978 to 1995. In the mid-1970s, WGN-TV was the first made available beyond, or rather, let me start over again, sorry about that. In the mid-1970s, WGN-TV was first made available beyond the Chicago area when it was transmitted via microwave relay to cable television providers in the central Midwestern United States that lacked access to an independent entertainment-based station. By late 1978, WGN-TV was being broadcast to 574 cable systems covering most of western, central, and southern Illinois, and large areas of Indiana, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, and Michigan, reaching an estimated 8.6 million subscribers. On November 9, 1978, Tulsa, Oklahoma-based satellite carrier United Video Incorporated uplinked the WGN-TV signal to a SATCOM-3 transponder for distribution to cable and C-band satellite subscribers throughout the U.S. This resulted in WGN-TV joining the ranks of Atlanta independent station WTCG, later WTBS, and now WPCH-TV, to become America's second national superstation. Independent stations distributed via satellite to cable providers within their respective regions or nationwide. Within a week of attaining national status, WGN-TV was being carried on approximately 200 cable systems across the country, reaching an estimated 1 million subscribers. The station's cable reach grew over the next several years. Outside the Midwest, the station was most commonly distributed in the central United States, where its telecast of Chicago Cubs baseball, Chicago Bulls basketball, and The Bozo Show were highly popular, and gradually expanded to most of the U.S. Tribune, and station management treated WGN-TV as a passive superstation, asserting a neutral position over United Video, relaying its signal to a national audience and leaving United to handle national promotion of the WGN signal. This allowed the station to continue paying for syndicated programming and advertising at local rates, rather than those comparable to other national networks. As such, WGN-TV became the first Tribune-owned independent station to be distributed to a national paid television audience. For about 11 years afterward, the WGN-TV satellite signal carried the same programming as within Chicago. WFLD Channel 32 began strengthening its syndication slate in late 1979, when it acquired the local rights to off-network series such as MASH, Happy Days, and All in the Family, which helped it edge ahead of Channel 9 in the ratings by the end of that year. Tribune appointed Robert King to replace Sheldon Cooper, who was promoted to president and CEO of the new Tribune Entertainment syndication unit as the station's general manager in 1982. WGN-TV then acquired the rights to strong first-run and off-network syndicated programs such as Laverne and Shirley, Good Times, Little House on the Prairie, and WKRP in Cincinnati. WGN's ratings improved throughout the 1980s under King and his successor, Dennis Fitzsimmons, overtaking WFLD to again become the market's top-rated independent by the end of the decade. WGN-TV gained 2 additional UHF independent competitors over 8 months in the early 1980s. On September 18, 1981, Focus Broadcasting signed on Joliet, Illinois-based WFBN Channel 66, which is now Univision-owned and operated WGBO-DT, initially showing local public access programs during the day and the Spectrum subscription service at night. On April 4, 1982, a shared operation over UHF Channel 60 involving Metro West Corporation owned English-language outlet WPWR-TV, which primarily carried the sports-centered pay service SportsVision, and Hatco 60 owned Spanish-language outlet WBBS-TV, which is today's WXFT-DT. A Unimas owned and operated station. Oh, my day's great. Just hung around the house, nothing of note, just chilled all day. How was your day? WGN and WFLD remained the market's strongest independent stations, as they both have more robust programming inventories than their competitors. In August 1983, WGN-TV unveiled the Chicago's very own campaign, one of the most successful station image campaigns in the United States. Peter Marino, WGN-TV's Director of Promotions, and Mike Watercott, the Creative Director of Chicago advertising agency Elsaman Johns and Law, developed the campaign promotions focused on the city's people and cultural heritage, and WGN-TV's local programming, and were accompanied by an image theme performed by the R&B singer and Chicago native Lou Rawls. The 7-note musical signature of the image theme was also incorporated into 2 music packages that were used for the station's newscasts and identifications between 1984 and 1993, while the slogan has served as the title for 2 other news themes commissioned exclusively for Channel 9. A John Hegner composed package used from 1993 to 1997, and a 615 music composed package that has been used since November 1st, 2007, as well as for a weekly profile series that aired from 1988 through 1990 and evolved into a weekly 9 p.m. news segment. The city or region's very own slogan was also adapted by some of its Tribune-owned sister stations, such as New York's WPIX, KTLA in Los Angeles, and WTTV in Indianapolis. On November 10, 1984, WGN-TV became an affiliate of the MGA UA Premier Network ad hoc syndicated film service. On November 22, 1987, during that evening's edition of the 9 o'clock news, the WGN-TV signal was briefly overridden by a video of an unidentified person wearing a max headroom mask and sunglasses in front of a sheet of corrugated metal, imitating the moving electronic background effect used in the character's TV and movie appearances. Oscillating audio interference obscured the audio portion throughout the 13-second video excerpt. WGN engineers successfully restored the signal by challenging the frequency of its Hancock Center studio transmitter link to override the pirated feed. Bemused, sports anchor Dan Roan, who was presenting highlights of that afternoon's home game between the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions when the initial hijack took place at 9:14 p.m., commented, "Well, if you're wondering what happened, so am I." And that the master control computer took off and went wild before continuing coverage without further incident. A similar intrusion occurred later that night on WTTW Channel 11, Chicago's main PBS station. The perpetrators of the WGN and WTTW intrusions have never been caught or identified. On May 18, 1988, the FCC reinstituted the Syndication Exclusivity Rights Rule, or SYNDEX. It had repealed in July 1980. This rule allowed television stations to claim local exclusivity over syndicated programs. It requires cable systems to either black out or secure an agreement with the claimant station or a syndication distributor to continue carrying a claimed program through an out-of-market station. The new rules became effective on January 1, 1990 to identify cable systems from potential blackouts. United Video began offering a separate WGN national feed consisting of local and some syndicated programs and sporting events, except those subjected to league restrictions pertaining to the number of games that could be shown on out-of-market stations annually that aired on the WGN Chicago signal, and substitute programs that were not subjected to exclusivity claims. And of the 4 United Video distributed superstations, WGN was the only one to increase its national coverage after the SYNDEX rules were implemented, adding 2.2 million subscribers by July 1990. Some stations replaced WPIX and WWOR, which are both New York stations, with the WGN Superstation feed during the early 90s. The station had been involved in various community projects, including the WGN-TV Children's Charities, a charitable foundation established in 1990 through the Robert R. McCormick Tribune Foundation, benefiting local organizations that help local children dealing with poverty and medical issues. On January 1, 1993, Tribune launched Chicagoland Television, or CLTV, a local cable news channel that featured rolling news, weather, sports content, public affairs, sports talk, and entertainment news programs. The channel formerly acted as an overflow feed for WGN's sports telecasts. Originally using in-house staff and resources from WGN-TV and the Chicago Tribune, CLTV consolidated its operations with WGN-TV on August 28, 2009, at which time the channel's operations were relocated from its original studio facility in Oak Brook, Illinois, to Channel 9's Bradley Place Studios. And editorial control of CLTV was turned over to Channel 9's news department. CLTV's format soon became less reliant on live newscasts, shifting focus to repurposed newscasts and local programming from WGN-TV. Following its acquisition of Tribune Media, Nexstar Media Group shut down Chicagoland Television on December 31, 2019, after 27 years of operation. Next, the affiliation with the WB from 1995 to 2006. On November 2, 1993, Time Warner and Tribune, which had acquired an 11% interest in the network in August 1995, announced the formation of the WB television network. Tribune committed 6 of the 7 independent stations it owned to serve as charter affiliates of the WB, though it initially exempted WGN-TV from the agreement because station management had expressed concerns about the effects the network's expansion plans for its primetime and daytime programs would affect Channel 9's sports broadcast rights and the effect the possible phasing out of its sports telecasts to fulfill network commitments would have on the Superstation feeds appealed to the U.S. cable and satellite providers. Despite its concerns with the WB affiliation, WGN had also vied to become the Chicago affiliate of UPN, or the United Paramount Network, which was a joint venture between Chris Kraft, United Television, and Paramount Television, that announced its launch plans on October 21st. On November 10th of that year, Paramount announced it had reached an agreement to affiliate UPN with NewsWeb Corporation-owned WPWR-TV Channel 50, which, upon the network's launch on January 16, 1995, became the largest independently owned UPN affiliate. On December 3, 1993, Tribune reached a separate agreement with Time Warner that would allow WGN-TV to serve as the WB's Chicago affiliate and allow its companion Superstation feed to act as a de facto national WB feed until the network was able to fill remaining gaps in affiliate coverage in white area markets that lacked an independent station following its launch. In exchange, the WB agreed to reduce its initial program offerings to 1 night per week from 2 to limit conflicts with Channel 9 sports programming. The Superstation feed, which by that time reached 37% of the country, would extend the network's initial coverage to 73% of all television-owning U.S. households. WGN-TV and its Superstation feed became a charter affiliate of the WB when the network launched on January 11, 1995. Upon joining the WB, WGN's programming remained mostly unchanged, continuing to feature syndicated programs, feature films, and locally produced shows. Because the WB initially offered primetime programs only on Wednesdays, Channel 9 filled the 7 to 9 p.m. time slot leading into its late evening newscast with feature films, or from September 1995 until September 1997, programs from the ad hoc action-packed syndication block on nights when no sports events were scheduled. By the time the WB adopted a Sunday through Friday 6-night-a-week schedule in September 1999, the station had moved its primetime film presentations to Saturday nights. WGN-TV chose not to clear the network's Kids WB block, instead airing a local morning newscast and an afternoon sitcom block on weekdays, and a mix of news, public affairs, and paid programs on Saturday mornings. On February 19th, WCIU-TV Channel 26, which at that time had become a full-time English language independent as a result of Univision, from which it had aired programming on a part-time basis, moving to WGBO Channel 66 the month prior, reached an agreement with Time Warner to carry the Kids WB lineup and to take on responsibilities of airing WB programs at times when WGN was scheduled to air sporting events during prime time. Even as Chicago's network-owned stations began adapting network-centric station branding during the mid to late 1990s, WGN-TV continued to be referred to on air as either WGN Channel 9 or simply Channel 9 by 1999. The station would then begin to be mainly referred to as WGN, as had the national feed since 1997. By that time, WGN replaced its late-night feature film presentations, except for the Saturday Action Theater showcase, with syndicated sitcoms. During the latter half of the 90s, most of the WB's remaining national coverage gaps were filled through standalone affiliations with UPN charter affiliates, leftover independents, and former non-commercial stations, as well as dual affiliations with existing network outlets, mainly UPN stations, in the top 100 media markets, and through the September 1998 launch of the WEB, or WEB, subsequently renamed the WB's 100-plus station group, a package feed of WB network and syndicated programs provided to participating cable-based affiliates in the 110 smaller U.S. markets. In January 1999, Time Warner and Tribune mutually agreed to stop relaying WB programming over the WGN Superstation feed, shifting from that year's fourth quarter. That move would take effect on October 6th, and the WGN national feed replaced the WB's primetime and children's lineups, respectively, with movies and syndicated programs. By 2002, game shows and talk and reality shows have been added to the station's schedule, while syndicated animated series were added on weekend mornings. Channel 9, which continued to carry the network locally, began clearing the entire WB network schedule in September 2004, when it assumed the rights to the Kids WB lineup from WCIU-TV Channel 26. Effectively becoming the sole station in the Chicago market to run cartoons on weekday afternoons. WGN continued to carry Kids WB's remaining Saturday morning lineup, which initially aired in January 2006 on a tape delay basis on Sunday mornings, after the WB replaced the block's 2-hour weekday afternoon slot with the daytime WB rerun block. Next, affiliation with the CW and Superstation programming split. This is from 2006 to 2016. On January 24, 2006, the Warner Brothers Entertainment division of Time Warner and CBS Corporation announced the formation of the CW, a network that would initially feature a mix of programs originating on the WB and UPN, which Time Warner and CBS respectively would shut down upon the CW's launch, and new series that were to be developed for the CW. In conjunction with the launch announcement, Tribune signed a 10-year agreement involving 16 of the group's 19 WB affiliates, including WGN-TV, which would join 11 CBS-owned stations to form the CW's initial group of charter affiliates. Because the CW primarily chose its original affiliates based on the highest overall viewership in each market of the existing WB and UPN affiliates, WGN-TV was chosen as its Chicago affiliate over WPWR-TV Channel 50. WGN-TV had been the higher rated of the two stations, dating to Channel 50's sign-on. On February 22nd, Fox announced WPWR and 9 other non-Fox owned and operated stations would become the initial charter outlets of My Network TV, which is a joint venture between Fox television stations and 20th Television, meant to fill the 2 weeknight primetime hours that would be opened up on UPN and WB affiliated stations that were not chosen to become CW charter outlets. The CW did not commission the WGN national feed, which became to be known as Superstation WGN in November 2002, and then as WGN America in August 2008. To act as a national default feed for the network because it could maintain sufficient national coverage at launch through conventional over-the-air and digital multicast affiliates in the nation's 100 largest markets, as well as supplementary coverage in the remaining 110 markets through the CW+, a small market feed comprising primary and sub-channel only over-the-air affiliates, as well as cable-only affiliates that were part of the predecessor WB 100 Plus service. WGN-TV remained an affiliate of the WB until the network ceased operations on September 17, 2006, at which time it would become a charter member or a charter affiliate of the CW the following day when said network debuted. Channel 50, meanwhile, WPWR, had disaffiliated from UPN on September 4th and began carrying My Network TV programming upon that network's September 5th launch. WGN-TV had been one of the CW's highest rated affiliates in terms of viewership, often drawing more viewers than Fox-owned WFLD, even in primetime. WGN-TV carried the entire CW schedule from the network's launch, including its children's programming blocks Kids WB, the CW for Kids, Toon's Eye, Vortex with 2 X's, and One Magnificent Morning, from September 2013 to September 16. However, WGN aired the network's daytime talk show block, which had been reduced to 1 hour from 2 in September 2011, 1 hour earlier than other CW affiliates in the Central Time Zone. That would be at 2 p.m. whereas the recommended time is 3 p.m., and that would align with the block's East Coast airtime. WGN-TV gradually evolved its programming during the late 2000s and 2010s, adopting a news-intensive format, expanding its news production to 70 hours per week by 2016, and shifting its weekday daytime lineup towards mainly first-run talk and game shows during the daytime hours. Because fewer film packages were offered on the syndication market, its weekend schedule also relied less on feature films and shifted back towards local lifestyle and tourism programs and additional first-run and off-network syndicated shows. On April 1st, 2007, Chicago-based real estate investor Sam Zell announced plans to purchase the Tribune Company in an $8.2 billion leveraged buyout that gave Tribune employees stock and effective ownership of the company. The transaction and privatization of the company were completed upon termination of Tribune stock at the close of trading on December 20th, 2007. Both the sales closure, excluding network-owned stations, WGN-TV was one of 2 commercial television stations in Chicago to have never been involved in an ownership transaction. On December 8, 2008, Tribune filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, citing a debt load of around $13 billion, making it the largest media bankruptcy in American corporate history. Tribune had accrued this debt from the Zell buyout and related privatization costs, and from a sharp downturn in revenue from newspaper advertising. After 4 years, on December 31st, 2012, Tribune formally exited from bankruptcy under the control of its senior debt holders, Oaktree Capital Management, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Angelo Gordon and Company. On January 10, 2013, Tribune announced plans to spin off its broadcasting and newspaper interests into 2 separate companies. WGN-TV and WGN Radio would remain with the original entity, which was renamed Tribune Media, and was restructured to focus on the company's broadcasting, digital, and real estate properties. The newspaper division, which included the Chicago Tribune, the Los Angeles Times, the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, and the Baltimore Sun, became the standalone entity Tribune Publishing, which became known as Trunk from June 2016 until the company reverted to its former name in October 2018. The split was completed on August 4th, 2014, ending Tribune's joint ownership with WGN-TV after 66 years and WGN Radio after 94 years. WGN-TV continues to maintain a content partnership with the Chicago Tribune. On December 13, 2014, Tribune converted the WGN America national feed into a conventional cable channel that focused on acquired and original programs containing significantly more domestic and international programming than the channel did before its separation from WGN-TV, and switched from a royalty to a retransmission consent revenue model. As a result, WGN America immediately ceased simulcast of WGN-TV's Chicago originated local programming, which was limited to its weekday noon, and until that simulcast was dropped by the previous February, the station's nightly 9 p.m. newscast, as well as news specials, public affairs, special events, and sports telecasts, alongside off-network syndicated reruns, religious programs, and feature films acquired for the Chicago feed. Starting with its addition to Comcast Xfinity's Chicago area systems on December 16th, the changeover allowed cable and IPTV subscribers within the market, as local satellite viewers had been able to do for about 2 decades, to receive WGN America for the first time. Due to the separation of the local and national feeds, Channel 9 did not carry WGN America's original drama series, such as Salem and Manhattan, outside of preview promotions, limiting the local availability of these programs to subscribers of DirecTV and Dish Network, and through WGN America's streaming agreement with Hulu. WGN-TV regained national availability in the second quarter of 2015, when Channel Master included the Chicago feed with the initial offerings of its linear TV over-the-top streaming service. Next, return to independence, 2016 to 2024. On May 23, 2016, after a year of protracted negotiations of financial terms, including the share of reverse compensation that Tribune paid to keep CW programming on those stations, Tribune Broadcasting and CBS Corporation reached a 5-year agreement that allowed 12 of Tribune's 13 CW-affiliated stations to remain with the network until 2021. Tribune exempt WGN-TV from the renewed agreement, intending to free up its schedule to offer more coverage of Chicago Cubs, White Sox, Bulls, and Blackhawks games in prime time during that calendar year, thereby giving WGN over-the-air exclusivity over all sporting events it was contracted to broadcast for the first time since 1993. The WB and the CW each contractually limited the number of network program preemptions, other than those caused by long-form breaking news coverage that could occur on an annual basis, and in compliance with these restrictions, WGN-TV purchased airtime on CLTV from 1993 to 2002, then WCIU-TV Channel 26 from 1999 to 2015, and WPWR-TV Channel 50 from 2015 to 2016, to carry the about 30 sports telecasts it was contracted to produce each year. WB and CW network programs that were displaced from their regular schedule were shown on a tape delay basis later in the week, usually in a graveyard shift, or on a weekend evening that was not occupied by a scheduled game telecast. Neither the WB nor the CW aired primetime programs on Saturdays, and the network had no Sunday programming from September 2009 until October 2018. Concurrently, Fox affiliate WPWR, or not Fox affiliate, but Fox announced WPWR Channel 50 would take over as the CW affiliate in Chicago. And on September 1st, WGN-TV reverted to independent status, marking the first time in 21 years it was not affiliated with a major broadcast network. Time slots that were previously occupied by CW network shows were mainly filled with syndicated programs on weekdays and an expanded weekend morning newscast, station-produced lifestyle programs, and syndicated educational programs on weekends. Beginning the same day, all CW programming moved to Channel 50, resulting in the weeknight-only My Network TV schedule being shifted to air on a 3-hour delay from 10 p.m. to midnight. Next up, the aborted sale of WGN-TV to Sinclair Broadcast Group, which then led to the sale to Nexstar Media Group. Sinclair Broadcast Group announced its purchase of Tribune Media on May 8, 2017 for $3.9 billion, a deal that station employees publicly criticized due to concerns about the influence of the conservative-leaning group could have on WGN's news content. To meet a regulatory compliance, Sinclair divested WGN-TV to a limited liability company controlled by Baltimore-based automotive dealer Stephen Fader, who has acted as a business associate to Sinclair executive chairman David Smith for $60 million. Under the terms of the deal, Sinclair planned to operate the station through programming and sales service agreements and would hold an option to repurchase the station within 8 years. Following FCC Chairman Ajit Pai's public criticism of the proposed deal, Sinclair abandoned the deal and disclosed it would instead directly acquire WGN-TV. Despite this, the FCC voted to bring the merger up for a hearing by an administrative law judge, prompting Tribune Media to terminate the deal on August 9, 2018, and file a breach of contract lawsuit. Following the collapse of the Sinclair merger, Nexstar Media Group agreed to acquire Tribune's assets on December 3, 2018 for $6.4 billion in cash and debt. The transaction received approval by the FCC on September 16, 2019 and was finalized 3 days later. WGN's return to the CW as an owned and operated station. This is from 2024 to today. Fonz in the house. What's up, brother? On May 1st, 2024, it was announced that WGN-TV will rejoin the CW on September 1st after the network's current affiliation agreement with WCIU-TV Channel 26 expired on August 31st. Because Nexstar is the majority owner of the CW, WGN is a network-owned and operated station, the second largest directly owned after KTLA in Los Angeles. Alright, now to programming, and we'll start with locally produced programs. WGN-TV currently produces the following programs, some of which were previously rebroadcast on CLTV. Those include Adelante Chicago, which is translated in English to Onward Chicago. This is a bi-weekly public affairs program airing on alternate Saturday mornings at 6:30 a.m., debuting on February 19, 2000, and was originally hosted by Eddie Aruza. As of December 2025, it is hosted by Lourdes Duarte and focuses on Chicago's Hispanic community and culture. People to People is a bi-weekly public affairs program airing Saturday mornings at 6:30, alternating with Adelante Chicago. It debuted in 1973 with local civil rights leader Edwin C. Bill Berry as its original host. As of December 2025, its current host is Micah Materi. The program focuses on community events and topical discussions for the African American community. Daytime Chicago is a morning lifestyle program which airs weekdays at 10 a.m., premiering on September 13, 2021. Hosted by Tanya Francisco and Amy Rutledge, it features segments focusing on subjects such as fashion, cooking, travel, and the arts. Spotlight Chicago is an afternoon lifestyle program that airs on Channel 9 weekdays at 1 p.m., which debuted on September 11, 2023. It is hosted by Ji Suk Yi and Sarah Gendra and features local events, people, attractions, and organizations. WGN-TV Political Report, which debuted on January 12, 2020 and airs Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. This is a weekly political talk show in which hosts Paul Lesnick and Talman Bradley and discusses Chicago area and national political issues. And Backstory with Larry Potash. This is a half-hour historical series that premiered on October 18, 2018. Of course, hosted by Larry Potash, it airs Sunday nights at 11, and it looks at history, culture, religion, and science. In addition, Channel 9 broadcasts several local events, including the Chicago Thanksgiving Parade, which has aired on the station since 2007 under an agreement with the Chicago Festival Association, by which the WGN National feed, which continues to carry the parade despite WGN America's December 2014 programming separation from Channel 9, was given national simulcast rights. The Chicago St. Patrick's Day Parade, which aired from 1949 to 2002. The Chicago Auto Show from 1952 to 1992 and once again since 1999. And the Philadelphia-based Murmurs Parade by arrangement with Superstation WGN-TV. Local events that WGN-TV aired in previous years have included the Bud Billiken Parade from 1978 to 2011, with WCIU-TV Channel 26 obtaining primary rights to the broadcast beginning in 2012, before shifting to ABC-owned WLS-TV Channel 7, and which had been a partial rights holder for the parade since 1984. Former programs include The Bozo Show, which was a long-running children's program that aired under various titles and formats. It was Channel 9's most successful local program in terms of both ratings and cultural impact, and became the best-known iteration of the Bozo franchise, partly as a result of the exposure it received after WGN became a national superstation in 1978. At the peak of its popularity, ticket reservations for the show's studio audience surpassed a 10-year backlog. In response to Chicago Public Schools' rule changes that disallowed students from going home for lunch, the program was moved to weekday mornings and switched to a pre-taped format in August 1980. To accommodate the launch of the WGN Morning News, Bozo was moved to Sunday mornings in September 1994, remaining there until it was discontinued in 2001. For the final 4 years of its run, the Bozo's Super Sunday Show incorporated segments compliant with FCC educational programming requirements. Charlando, which is translated in English as chatting. This was a Spanish language talk show that aired on the station from 1964 to 1999 and focused on Chicago's Hispanic and Latino communities. The program originally aired Saturday mornings until 1992, when it was moved to Sundays. It was hosted by Peter Nuno for its entire 35-year run. Creature Features. This was a local version of a horror film franchise which aired Saturday nights from September 19, 1970 through May 19, 1976, and featured classic horror and science fiction films released between the 1930s and 1950s. The films were presented as a dissembled voice known only as the Creature, played by Carl Grayson and later Marty McNeely. After the WGN version ended, the title, Unpluralized, was used by WFLD for its weekend horror movie presentations until 1979. There was also Family Classics, which was a showcase of family-oriented feature films which ran from September 14, 1962 to December 25, 2000, and was co-created by Fraser Thomas and Fred Silverman. Thomas also selected and bowdlerized the future films. Roy Leonard took over hosting duties following Thomas's death in April 1985 rather, and remained in that role until Family Classics ended their initial run. It was revived as an occasional series on December 8, 2017, with longtime entertainment reporter Dean Richards as host. Garfield, Goose, and Friends. This was a children's program that aired on WGN from September 1955 to October 1976. It is considered to be the longest-running puppet show on television. The series was hosted by Fraser Thomas as the Prime Minister to the titular Clacking Goose puppet, which was puppeteered by Roy Brown, who designated himself as King of the United States. The WGN-TV run of the program features a mix of puppet characters developed by Brown before and after the show's move to Channel 9. The show also featured animated shorts and educational segments. There was also Issues Unlimited, which was a Sunday morning public affairs program moderated by Chicago Bulletin editor and columnist Hurley Green Sr. from 1971 to 1987. This program featured a panel of local media representatives interviewing local and national newsmakers. And Ray Rayner and His Friends, originally Breakfast with Bugs Bunny, from 1962 to 1964. Ray Rayner and His Friends was a long-running children's program hosted by Ray Rayner from 1962 to 1980. The program featured animated shorts, arts and crafts segments, animal characters, science segments conducted with J. Bruce Mitchell of the Museum of Science and Industry, and a viewer mail segment in which Ray Rayner appeared alongside a talking orange dog puppet, Cuddly Dudley, voiced by Roy Brown. Channel 9 formerly served as the Muscular Dystrophy Association's Love Network station for Chicago. Of course, Muscular Dystrophy Association is the MDA. And the station carried the charity's annual telethon on Labor Day and the preceding Sunday night each September from 1973 to 2012. For most of its run on WGN, except in 1994, thanks to the Major League Baseball strike, WGN-TV would preempt portions of the telethon on Labor Day to carry Chicago Cubs or White Sox games held during the afternoon of the holiday. Through its national distribution beginning with the 1979 event, donations to the WGN-produced local segments of the telethon were also pledged by viewers in other parts of the United States and Canada. The broadcast would move from syndication to ABC in September 2013 as a 2-hour special, airing thereafter by association on WLS-TV until the final telecast of the then retitled MDA Show of Strength in August 2014. Studio facilities. The station's Bradley Place Studios produces a large number of its own programs, and has been used to produce nationally syndicated programs including Donahue, U.S. Farm Report, and At the Movies. The Illinois Lottery. WGN-TV served as the originating station for the Illinois Lottery, beginning at the lottery's July 1974 inception. Live drawings were part of a half-hour Thursday night broadcast hosted by Ray Rayner at the Bradley Place Studios. Channel 9 shared the drawing rights with WSNS-TV Channel 44 from March to May 1975, and once again from September 1975 through August 1977, when Channel 9 gained exclusivity over the telecast. With the introduction of the daily game, now known today as Pick 3, in February 1980, drawings began airing at 6:57 p.m. nightly. After a 3-year run on WFLD, which assumed drawing rights in January 1984, the lottery moved the drawing telecast back to Channel 9 in January 1987. In August 1992, the lottery awarded the telecast rights to its drawings and game show to CBS-owned WBBM, who outbid both WGN and WLS, and saw the move as a way to help improve viewership for its third-place 10 p.m. newscast effective December 28th. Citing in part the station's statewide cable distribution, which after the Syndex rules were implemented, would occasionally subject the evening drawings to preemption associated with that of the delayed 9 p.m. news when sports clearance restrictions applied to the WGN national feed. The lottery moved its telecast back to Channel 9 on January 1st, 1994, citing declining revenues under the WBBM contract. The live evening results were shifted to 9:22 p.m. Midday drawings for Pick 3 and Pick 4 were introduced on December 20th, 1994. The 12:40 p.m. drawings were shown during WGN's noon newscast on weekdays, while Saturday drawings were usually not shown live nationally because of programming substitutions. In addition to the live drawing results, WGN also carried 2 lottery-produced weekly game shows from September 16, 1989 to December 19, 1992, and from January 8th through July 2nd, 1994. The station aired $100,000 Fortune Hunt. It was originally hosted by Jeff Coopwood with co-host Linda Kohlmeyer, and subsequently with Mike Jackson as host. In the program, 6 contestants selected from a scratch-off entry ticket drawing choose panels from a numbered 36-panel game board consisting dollar amounts. The prize, or rather the player with the highest prize amount after 5 rounds won $100,000, and their 2 chosen at-home partners won $500 each. The remaining on-air contestants kept their existing winnings and their partners received $100. Its successor, Illinois Instant Riches, which was later retitled Illinois' Luckiest in 1998, ran from July 9, 1994 to October 21, 2000, with Mark Gutman and Linda Kohlmeyer as co-hosts. Produced in conjunction with Mark Goodson Productions, later Jonathan Goodson Productions. In September 1996, WGN-TV began carrying the big game multi-state drawing each Tuesday and Friday. This would be replaced by Mega Millions in May 2002. Powerball drawings were eventually added upon Illinois joining that multi-state lottery in July or January 2010. WGN America ceased carrying the drawings on December 12, 2014, and the lottery ceased televising its daily drawings and moved the results for the Pick 3, Pick 4, Lotto with Extra Shot, and Lucky Day Lotto, formerly Little Lotto until 2011 games, exclusively to its website on October 1st, 2015, and switched to a random number generator structure. Okay, now we have made it to sports programming. WGN-TV has had a long association with Chicago sports, having regularly televised games of most of the city's major professional sports franchises, particularly the Chicago Cubs, White Sox, Bulls, and Blackhawks, and several local and regional collegiate teams, including the Illinois Fighting Illini, the Northwestern Wildcats, the DePaul Blue Demons, and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, as well as Big Ten Conference universities. The Cubs and White Sox were the first teams to be carried on the station when on April 23, 1948, WGN aired a crosstown rivalry game in which the Sox would win 4-1. The number of Cubs and White Sox games on WGN gradually decreased to about 70 per season for each team by 2008 as a result of the two Major League Baseball clubs, as well as the NBA's Chicago Bulls, moving some of their local game telecasts to cable-oriented regional sports networks, such as Fox Sports Net Chicago, which later became FSN Chicago. Those telecasts were from 1999 to 2003. And then Chicago or Comcast Sportsnet Chicago, which would then become NBC Sports Chicago from 2004. Of course, NBC Sports Chicago shut down in 2024, and it was replaced by the Chicago Sports Network. Beginning in 2015, WGN-TV began sharing the over-the-air rights to Cubs games with ABC-owned WLS-TV, resulting in Channel 9 reducing its coverage to 45 games per season as part of a 4-year contract involving the two stations. WGN carried the White Sox until 1972 and for one season in 1981. The White Sox would move its local telecast to Channel 9 after an 8-year absence in 1990. WGN-TV began carrying the Bulls games in the team's inaugural season in 1966 after WFLD carried its games for 4 years. The Bulls returned to Channel 9 for the 1989-1990 NBA season, overlapping with the start of the team's NBA championship dynasty during Michael Jordan's tenure with the team. WGN initially carried away games of the NHL's Chicago Blackhawks, whose then owner Bill Wirtz had prohibited broadcasters of home games to sustain ticket sales from 1961 to 1975. The Blackhawks returned to the station during the 2008-2009 NHL season with a package of home and away games following Rocky Wirtz's decision to end the home game television blackout after inheriting the franchise following his father's death. WGN-TV carried Chicago Bears regular season football games as a Dumont affiliate during the 1951 NFL season, after which the team moved its telecast to ABC and by association WBKB-TV, now WLS-TV, under a limited contract. The Bears' first game on WGN in 55 years was broadcast on October 1st, 2012, when the station carried the team's Monday Night Football game against the Dallas Cowboys. Although WLS-TV Channel 7 had rights of first refusal to Monday Night Football due to its corporate parent, the Walt Disney Company's majority ownership of ESPN, Channel 7 decided not to carry the game so it could air that night's live broadcast of ABC's Dancing with the Stars. From November 1978 until October 2014, WGN America frequently simulcast WGN sports broadcasts, mainly Cubs, White Sox, and Bulls games nationwide, when permitted under the station's sports contracts, until it ceased offering sporting events in September 2019. Channel 9 also distributed its White Sox and Bulls telecast to television stations in Illinois, Indiana, and Iowa that are within their respective broadcast territories, including CW affiliate Wish TV in Indianapolis, and the subchannels of WGN sister stations WHODT, which is the NBC station in Des Moines, Iowa, and WQAD, that's the ABC station in Davenport, Iowa, serving the Twin Cities. Channel 9's Cubs and White Sox game broadcasts were also often carried on the MLB Extra Innings feeds available to DirecTV subscribers. On January 2nd, 2019, the White Sox, Bulls, and Blackhawks agreed to an exclusive multi-year deal with NBC Sports Chicago that would take effect that year's third quarter. On February 13th of that year, the formation of the Marquee Sports Network, a joint venture between the Cubs and Sinclair Broadcast Group that launched in early 2020, was announced. Due to the four teams choosing to completely remove their local game telecasts off broadcast television in favor of exclusivity, airing them on regional sports networks, WGN-TV wound down its local sports coverage during early to mid-2019, beginning with the April 1st game between the Chicago Blackhawks and the Winnipeg Jets. As the station's contracts with all four teams gradually expired, its final game telecast involved the Bulls' away game against the New York Knicks on April 9th, and the Cubs' away game against the rival St. Louis Cardinals on September 27th. WGN-TV's final sports telecast involving any of the station's four legacy professional teams was the second game of a White Sox Detroit Tigers doubleheader at Guaranteed Rate Field on September 28, 2019. Meanwhile, on February 19, 2020, Chicago Fire FC announced a multi-year agreement with Channel 9 to broadcast its MLS games, beginning with its March 7th match against the New England Revolution, returning regular sporting events to WGN after 7 months. Those games would be moved to MLS Season Pass beginning in 2023, and without any NFL-style syndication rights, the 2022 season was the final season for Fire broadcast on any television channel. The deal also marked the first time in the station's 74-year history that there would not be any local sports programming on the station. Sports programming would return to Channel 9 in 2023, when it began carrying the CW's weekend coverage of the controversial Live Golf League in lieu of then affiliate WCIU, which declined to carry the tournament broadcast due to existing weekend programming commitments. Later that year, WGN also acquired rights to the network's Atlantic Coast Conference football and men's basketball game telecasts, which Channel 26 also chose not to cover. The CW's sports programming moved to Channel 9 full-time upon it becoming an owned and operated station in September 2024. Yeah, this is a pretty long one. It's been about an hour and a half, and we're just now getting to the news operation of the station. WGN-TV presently produces or broadcasts 91 and a half hours of locally produced newscasts each week, consisting of 16 hours on weekdays, Monday through Friday, 16 hours each day, 6 hours on Saturdays, and 5.5 hours on Sunday. It has the highest number of hours of newscast output of any television station in Chicago and in Illinois for that matter, and the 6th highest newscast output in the country. The station also produces 2 late evening sports news programs. GN Sports is a half-hour highlights and interview program which airs nightly at 10:30. An Instant Replay is a Sunday evening highlights program that comprises the final 20 minutes of the 9 o'clock news. Until regular sports telecasts on WGN ended in September 2019, the station's midday, early, and late evening newscasts were subject to delay or cancellation due to sports coverage overrunning into those time periods. From July 8, 2010 onward, CLTV had served as an alternate broadcaster of WGN-TV newscasts that were preempted by the latter's sports broadcasts. CLTV aired live half-hour editions of WGN News at 9 on nights when Channel 9 carried a sports event in the West Coast that started at 9 p.m. local time. An additional half-hour live newscast followed the game telecast on Channel 9 and a newscast that had originally been titled WGN News at 9 before the 2016 launch of its 10 p.m. news. The WGN-TV weather staff also provides local weather updates for WGN Radio under an agreement that began on October 13, 2008 at the conclusion of the Weather Channel's 10-year contract with the radio station. News Department history is up next. WGN-TV has been well known in the Chicago area for its news programming, which through its former co-ownership with the Chicago Tribune has played an important role since its launch. The WGN-TV News Department has long been one of the most respected local television news operations in the U.S. and has won several journalism awards including Emmy, Associated Press, United Press International, and DuPont Columbia Awards. The station's pool of news anchors and reporters has included the likes of Jack Taylor, 1954 through 1984, Carl Grayson, 1955 through 1980, Marty McNeely from 1969 to 1986, Robert Jordan, 1973 to 1978, and then his second run from 1980 to 2016, Mary O'Clair from 1978 to the present, Dan Roan from 1984 to 2022, and Steve Sanders from 1982 to 2020. WGN's news department shared operations and management with WGN Radio until 1983, when the news division was split into separate departments maintained by the respective properties. WGN-TV's news department began operations on April 5, 1948, which is the same day the television station itself launched. And that coincided with the launch of its first regular news program, Chicagoland Newsreel, which was Chicago's first television newscast to consist entirely of filmed coverage. The 15-minute newscast broadcast originally aired weeknights at 6:45 p.m., and a midday edition at 11:30 a.m. was added in September 1949. The program was anchored by news director Spencer Allen, who had been a reporter and news writer for WGN Radio since 1938. It had a large staff of photographers and technicians, many of whom had worked for the Tribune. Allen also anchored a 15-minute midday news program, Spencer Allen and the News, from 1951 to 1953. From 1948 to 1965, Channel 9 produced an additional 15-minute long newscast at 6:30 p.m., which was presented by Austin Kliplinger, who was replaced in 1953 by Allen and then by Lloyd Petit in 1956. The anchor read the news summary and Fran Weigel was the weather anchor. The program was expanded to 30 minutes in September 1955 when newsreel was discontinued in favor of an amended sports news segment that was anchored by Vince Lloyd. Under Allen's leadership, WGN-TV's newscast evolved from a police blotter fire alarm type of news operation to incorporating more in-depth and investigative reports. WGN-TV was the first Chicago television station to televise a local appearance by a U.S. president during Harry S. Truman's 1948 visit to Chicago. The station also provided mobile coverage of General Douglas MacArthur's visit to the city in April 1951. It has also provided coverage of the Republican and Democratic presidential conventions each election cycle since 1952, and extensive poll coverage of Pope John Paul II's Mass at Grant Park in 1979. In September 1951, WGN-TV began carrying a 15-minute late-night edition of Chicagoland Newsreel that followed its late evening movie presentations. By 1967, the program had evolved into Night Beat, a 30-minute overnight newscast in which the main anchor, which included Grayson, McNeely, Cliff Mercer, and Jack Taylor, presented a summary of local and world news headlines and a brief weather forecast summary. Night Beat was discontinued in 1983. In February 1955, the station installed a coaxial cable link from the city room of the Chicago Tribune, which was originally done for the early newscast first edition, which aired from 1954 to 1956, to allow Tribune reporters and contributors to comment on developing stories being covered by the newspaper and the WGN News Department. After WGN-TV became an independent station in August 1956, the evening newscast was moved to 7 p.m., becoming the market's first prime-time newscast, and was often canceled or postponed due to sports coverage. The evening newscast was moved to 10 p.m. in September 1959, originally under the title 10th Hour News, and later as the Park Ruddle News and Jack Taylor, John Drury, and News 9. In May 1960, the late newscast, which by that point was anchored by Jim Conway, became the first local television news program in the country to expand to a half-hour broadcast. Standard news updates, which were presented by on-staff anchors under the title WGN Newsbreak, also ran during the late morning, early afternoon, and primetime hours in between programs. In 1965, WGN-TV appointed the first dual anchor team in Chicago television news. The team consisted of Gary Park, previously of KCRA-TV, which is the NBC station in Sacramento, California, and Jim Ruddle, who previously worked at WTVT in Tampa, Florida. Both presented evening newscasts. On January 9, 1967, WGN-TV shifted the 10 p.m. edition of the newscast by 15 minutes and reduced it to that length in an attempt to improve viewership by placing the telephone quiz show The Name Game in the time slot, reducing competition with late newscasts on channels 7, 5, and 2. This experiment would end in May of 1967 when Channel 9 reverted the late newscast time slot to 10 p.m. and expanded it to 25 minutes. In June 1967, Ruddle left the station to join NBC-owned WMAQ-TV Channel 5, to be followed 2 years later by Park taking a primetime anchor role in San Francisco at KTVU, which at the time was an independent television station. Also in 1965, WGN premiered the first morning news show, Top of the Morning. Orion Samuelson, then a farm reporter for WGN Radio, who would eventually host the syndicated U.S. Farm Report from 1975, and Harold Turner, later replaced by Max Armstrong, provided agricultural news and weather. The program would be replaced in May 1984 by a traditional morning newscast, Chicago's First Report, which was canceled due to low viewership that December. John Drury joined WGN-TV in 1967 and worked for 3 years as anchor of its 10 p.m. news and occasionally of Night Beat. After working for Channel 7 for 9 years, Drury returned to WGN-TV in 1979, displacing Jack Taylor as the 10 p.m. News 9 anchor. During his second stint at Channel 9, Drury took on an expanded role doing assignments and investigative reporting, often producing the reports with investigative reporter Alex Burkholder. In 1982, Chicago Mayor Jane Byrne, accompanied by members of her public relations and cabinet staff, tried to persuade Drury to shelve a report on Byrne's use of public funds for city festivals designed to promote her administration in relation to her stint residing in the Caprini Green housing projects. Drury persisted with the report, which aided in Byrne's loss to Harold Washington in the 1983 Democratic mayoral primary and helped earn Drury a Chicago Emmy Award for Individual Excellence, the first of 4 Emmys during his career. Another mainstay of WGN-TV was Tom Skilling, who joined the station in August 1978 to succeed weather reporter Harry Volkman, who worked initially from 1967 to 1970, and then his second run was from 1974 to 1978. Skilling replaced Volkman as the station's main evening meteorologist. One second. Oh, there we go. Got that out. Skilling, who was rumored to have been the highest paid local television meteorologist in the United States, became known for presenting his forecast with detailed but easy to understand analysis and accuracy. Most notably his predictions of the Groundhog Day blizzard 2 weeks before it hit the Chicago area in late January and early February of 2011. Skilling made routine use of computer models to illustrate forecasts. Skilling also occasionally hosted half-hour documentary series explaining extreme weather phenomena and advancements in forecasting technology. Skilling earned several Chicago Emmy nominations and awards. He also presented a weekly feature on the 9 p.m. news, Ask Tom Why, in which he answered viewer-submitted weather questions. Under Skilling, WGN-TV centralized its weather operations to include WGN-TV, WGN Radio, CLTV, and the Chicago Tribune. In May 2007, the station became a broadcast partner in the automated weather observation network WeatherBug, the largest station member by market size. Skilling holds the record as the longest-serving television meteorologist at a single station in the Chicago market, having served as chief meteorologist at Channel 9 for 45 years, until he retired from broadcasting on February 28, 2024. Remarkable career. The late newscast was moved into prime time on March 10, 1980, becoming known as the 9 o'clock news, and from May 1993 as WGN News at 9, as part of a uniform retitling of its newscast under the WGN News moniker, used since 1981. The shift to the 9 p.m. hour briefly made it the first hour-long primetime newscast in the Midwest, and for its first 7 years, it was Chicago's only 9 p.m. local newscast. Initially airing 5 nights a week, the revamped weeknight-only newscast was first anchored by Drury Skilling, sports anchor Bill Frink, and commentator Lynn O'Connor. On June 9th of that year, the program switched to a hybrid local-national format that incorporated the Independent News Network, or INN, a Tribune syndicated nightly news program that was later retitled INN, The Independent News, in September 1984, and USA Tonight in January 1987, originating from New York's sister station WPIX. This replaced the locally produced segments that had occupied the 9:30 half hour since the March format change. After briefly being confined to weeknights during the rescheduling, half-hour weekend editions of the 9 p.m. broadcast were added on October 4th, 1980. Anchored originally by Larry Roderick and Robert Jordan. By 1985, Drury, who returned to his previous role as main co-anchor at Channel 7 in late 1984, and Denise Cannon, who became the former's co-anchor in 1981 and departed at the end of 1984, were both succeeded as principal anchors by Rick Rosenthal and Pat Harvey. Since the reformatting as a primetime newscast, WGN-TV has been the ratings leader in that 9 p.m. time slot and typically holds a larger audience than the 10 p.m. news on Channel 2. Take that out. The 9 p.m. newscast dominance was such that from 1984 to 1989, when it was unseated by San Francisco's KTVU, it had the largest viewership of any primetime local newscast in the country. Competition for the 9 o'clock news arrived on November 16, 1987, when Fox-owned and operated WFLD debuted an hour-long 9 p.m. newscast. Although WFLD aggressively marketed its newscast towards a younger audience as having a fresher style than WGN's more traditional news format, Channel 9 remained Chicago's top-rated 9 p.m. newscast to the present day, even with the WFLD newscast having the Fox primetime lineup as its lead-in. For this reason, WFLD moved its newscast back to its original 7 p.m. time slot in September 1988, only to return it to 9 p.m. the following year to accommodate the planned expansion of Fox's primetime lineup. A sports highlight and interview program entitled Instant Replay, which was hosted by sports director Dan Roan until his retirement in May 2022, began accompanying the newscast's Sunday edition in August 1987. WGN-TV re-expanded its primetime newscast to 1 hour on June 4, 1990, after Tribune discontinued production of USA Tonight under a contract between Tribune and Turner Broadcasting, in which Tribune stations were granted access to CNN News Source content and began feeding video footage to the CNN Video Wire service. WGN began programming long-form news outside its established 9 p.m. slot on September 19, 1983, when it debuted Midday News Scope, which grew out of the 3-minute long local news segments that have been featured during the INN Midday Edition since January 1983. Originally anchored by Rick Rosenthal, who was replaced in 1984 by Steve Sanders. The newscast, a local version of Telepictures and Gannett Broadcasting's short-lived syndicated format Newscope, included local news headlines, weather forecasts, and in-depth consumer, financial, entertainment, and lifestyle features. The program was reformatted into a more traditional newscast and was retitled Chicago's Midday News on September 17, 1984, and was expanded to a full hour in September 1985. The Midday Newscast was concurrently rebranded from WGN News at Noon to WGN Midday News, with the expansion eventually expanded to 90 minutes, moving to 11:30 a.m. on September 15, 2008. WGN Midday News was expanded to 2 hours beginning at 11 a.m. on October 5, 2009. On September 19, 1988, WGN became the first Chicago television station to closed caption its newscast for the hearing impaired. On January 25, 1992, the station debuted hour-long 8 a.m. newscasts on Saturday and Sunday to accommodate the launch of Chicago's weekend morning news and the concurring moves of Charlando and People to People to Sundays. WGN-TV dropped the long-running religious programs What's New, Heritage of Faith, and Mass for Shut-ins from its Sunday morning lineup. The Council of Religious Leaders of Metropolitan Chicago and other religious groups criticized this move on grounds that the programs cater to diverse religious audiences in fulfillment of the station's public service obligations. The Sunday edition was discontinued after the September 4, 1994 broadcast. The Saturday edition followed suit on December 19, 1998. News director Steve Ramsey cited the need to provide more resources for weekday morning newscasts. Weekend morning newscasts would return to the station on October 2, 2010, with the debut of hour-long editions at 6 a.m., which would later shift to a 2-hour block at 7 a.m. on September 10, 2016, following Channel 9's disaffiliation from the CW, and expanded to a third hour on Saturdays until 10 a.m. beginning January 11, 2020. Morning news programming was extended to weekdays on September 6, 1994, with the WGN Morning News debuting from 7 to 8 a.m. It was originally anchored by Dave Eckert, Sonia Gant, and meteorologist Paul Huttner. To improve viewership, the program, which replaced children's programs that had previously aired at that time, was soon reformatted to feature a mix of straight news and entertainment, and lifestyle features in a looser style similar to the morning radio programs. This reformatting helped morning news to eventually begin outcompeting local and national morning news programs, including its closest initial competitor, WFLD's Fox Thing in the Morning, which is now Good Day Chicago, in the 25 to 54 age demographic and in total viewers. The program was expanded to 2 hours, extending until 9 a.m. on January 8, 1996, with a later hour-long expansion to 10 a.m. being added on September 3, 2013. An hour-long 6 a.m. early edition of the newscast debuted on August 5, 1996. This newscast would gradually expand to 3 hours, beginning with an addition of a 5:30 a.m. half hour in January 2011 or 2001, and ending with its July 11th, 2011 extension to 4 a.m. WGN Morning News became the first Channel 9 newscast to be denied clearance on the national feed in September 1996 due to self-imposed exclusivity restrictions concerning paid segments and rate changes the station's sales department would have to pay if the segments aired nationally. Simulcast of the WGN Morning News temporarily returned to WGN America on February 3, 2014, when it began airing the 4 a.m. hour. In July 1996, WGN-TV began using a Eurocopter AS-350 B-2 helicopter for news gathering. The aircraft was known as Skycam 9 and was used for breaking news events and traffic reporting. In October 1999, freelance reporter Jane Bull made headlines when she was hit from behind by a car. Bull suffered cartilage and ligament injuries to both of her legs after being pinned between the car involved in the accident and a WGN live truck, but was able to resume work in early November. In 2000, WGN-TV constructed a new 26,000 square foot newsroom covering 2 floors on the eastern portion of its studio facility on West Bradley Place, increasing the building size to approximately 131,000 square feet. The original newsroom was removed for use by the station's weather department. In April 2008, WGN-TV persuaded veteran WMAQ and WFLD anchor Mark Sapolsky, who turned down a contract with the latter station due to a proposed salary cut, to take over as lead anchor of the 9 p.m. news, replacing Steve Sanders. Sapolsky co-anchored the weeknight newscast until his retirement from broadcasting in December 2017 and was replaced 2 months later by Joe Donlin, who served in a similar role at NBC station KGW in Portland, Oregon. On January 19, 2008, beginning with that night's edition of the 9 p.m. news, WGN-TV became the third television station in Chicago to broadcast local newscasts in high definition. Video from remote and field equipment was initially broadcast in 480p standard definition following the transition. HD cameras began to be used for field reports in July 2010, making WGN-TV the first station in Chicago to broadcast all locally originated news content in HD. Starting under the direction of news director Greg Caputo, WGN-TV expanded its news programming and launched an early evening newscast on September 15, 2008, entitled WGN Evening News, which began as a half-hour weeknight broadcast at 5:30. The newscast expanded to an hour starting at 5 p.m. on October 5, 2009, and Saturday and Sunday editions were added on July 12, 2014. The weekday editions of the newscast were later extended to a second hour starting at 4 p.m. on September 8, 2014, and then to 3 hours on April 4, 2017. In 2009, WGN-TV began streaming its weekday, midday, and 5 p.m. newscasts live on its website, WGN-TV.com. On February 22, 2010, WGN-TV became the first television station in Chicago to allow iPhone users to watch live streams of its newscasts, including the 6 to 9 a.m. block of the WGN Morning News, the midday news from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and the 5 p.m. newscasts were initially available for streaming to iPhone users. On October 5, 2015, the station restored a 10 p.m. newscast, originally airing Monday through Friday after a 35-year absence. Weekend editions of the 10 p.m. news were added on January 11, 2020. A secondary live sports news show, WGN Sports, premiered on January 28, 2020 as the lead-out program for the weeknight news at 10 o'clock. WGN Sports was originally co-hosted by Dan Roan and Jarrett Payton and focuses on sports news and highlights, featuring segments and in-studio interviews in a format similar to Instant Replay, and sports gaming and fantasy sports analysis. Weekend editions of WGN Sports were added on August 14, 2021, with the Sunday broadcast replacing the cuisine and tourism program Chicago's Best, which had aired on WGN-TV from January 2011 until August 2021. Yeah, this is a pretty long article, but we're just about finished. We've made it to notable on-air staff. Currently at Channel 9, you have weekend evening anchor Jackie Bang, weekend afternoon anchor Lourdes Duarte, weekend morning meteorologist Tim Joyce, and weekday morning anchor Dan Ponce. Former notable on-air staff include Fran Allison, Mike Bars, Bridget Balzan, Bob Bell, Steve Bell, Lou Boudreau, Tom Brenneman, Jack Brickhouse, Marshall Brodian, Lauren Brown, Roy Brown, Cheryl Burton, Chip Carey, Harry Carey, Susan Carlson, Bob Collins, Bob Costas, Joy Dioria, Meryl D., Phil Donahue, Mike Douglas, John Drury, Jim Durham, Judy Garcia, Milo Hamilton, Pat Harvey, Francis Horwitz, Bill Jackson, Bob Jordan, Johnny Red Kerr, Rich King, Wayne Larrivee, Ron Leonard, or rather Roy Leonard, Paul M. Lisnick, Vince Lloyd, Neil Locke, Nancy Liu, John Lounsbury, Joe McConnell, Elaine Mulqueen, Allison Payne, Lloyd Pettit, Jimmy Pearsall, Ray Raynard, Dean Edwards, Ron Rivera, Randy Salerno, Dan Sandberg, John Schubeck, Tom Skilling, Wendell Smith, Mark Zapolsa, Chuck Swirsky, Jack Taylor, Roseanne Tellez, Fraser Thomas, Bob Trendier, Robert Urich, Henry Volkman, Jennifer Weigel, Jim Williams, and Bill Weir. Technical information. Subchannels. WGN-TV is broadcast from an antenna on the Sears Tower, and the station signal is multiplex. Alright. Main WGN programming and the CW can be seen on channel 9.1 in 1080i high definition. Channel 9.2 is antenna TV at 480i HD and a 4:3 aspect ratio. 9.3 is the Western Multicast Network GRIT, which is in 480i HD. On 9.4 is Rewind TV, also in 480i HD. And The Nest can be seen on channel 9.5 in 480i high definition. WBBM TV also hosts its main CBS programming on channel 2.1 on WGN Spectrum, and that's in 1080i high definition. The main 2.1 subchannel of WBBM-TV is also broadcast on the WGN-TV multiplex. WBBM-TV, which is Chicago's high-power ATSC 3.0 or next-gen TV station, carries WGN-TV in that format. Analog to digital transition. WGN-TV began transmitting a digital television signal on UHF Channel 19 on January 4, 2001, using a transmitter located 1,486 feet on top of the Sears Tower. The station shut down its analog signal on VHF Channel 9 on June 12, 2009, the official date on which full-power television stations in the U.S. were mandated by a federal mandate to cease analog broadcasts. The WGN-TV digital signal continued to broadcast on its pre-transition frequency UHF Channel 19, and digital television receivers continued to display WGN-TV's virtual channel as Channel 9. At this date, WGN-TV permanently ceased transmissions from the John Hancock Center's West Antenna Tower, establishing its digital facilities at the Sears Tower for its main transmitter. Though not a participant in the SAFER Act, WWME-CA Channel 23 carried simulcast of Channel 9's 9 p.m. news, except in the event of sports delays, and Channel 5's morning and evening newscast until July 12th, to provide an analog signal for viewers who were unprepared for or who had reception issues following the digital transition. Canadian distribution. And this is the last excerpt of this article. In April 1985, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, or CRTC, approved eligibility for the signals of WGN-TV and fellow American superstations WTBS, WOR-TV, and WPIX to be retransmission as foreign services by multi-channel television providers in Canada. Under CRTC linkage rules first implemented in 1983 that required providers to offer U.S.-based program services in discretionary tiers, led to Canadian services, or tied to Canadian services, WGN-TV, WGN America, and other authorized U.S. superstations typically have been sold to prospective subscribers of domestic premium services such as Crave, Stars, Super Channel, Super Ekran, and Western Canada-based regional pay services Movie Central and Encore Avenue. Some providers, however, choose to offer WGN in a specialty tier under a related rule that allows for an eligible superstation of the provider's choice to be carried on a non-premium tier. After United Video began operating a separate national feed of WGN upon the U.S. implementation of the Syndex rules in January 1990, most Canadian cable providers began to replace the Chicago signal with the Superstation feed. As a network affiliate, WGN-TV provided WB and CW programs to areas of Canada distant from the Canadian-U.S. border that could not receive over-the-air signal from other WB or CW affiliates from American cities. The WGN local feed was subjected to fewer sports blackouts than WGN America had before the separation of the national and local feeds. Blackouts of programming to which Canadian broadcasters hold domestic rights apply only to imported U.S.-based specialty channels. Simultaneous substitution rules have applied to certain CW programs that were also carried by Canada-based terrestrial networks. The WGN-TV feed had also previously been available as part of the NHL Center Ice Sports Package, primarily for simulcast of Chicago Blackhawks games. That WGN-TV aired until the 2018-2019 season. On January 17, 2007, WGN's main Canadian uplink carrier, Shaw Broadcast Services, switched its distributed feed of the station to the Chicago signal due to increased licensing fees for the then Superstation feed. Despite this, some providers continue to carry the Superstation feed in place of or together with the Chicago signal, resulting in the duplication of CW network and many syndicated programs that are available in Canada on other U.S. networks. While the CRTC had approved the Chicago station's broadcast signal and its national cable feed for carriage on any domestic multi-channel television provider, because of the conversion of WGN America from a superstation into an independent general entertainment service and its resulting programming separation from WGN-TV on December 15, 2014, Tribune Broadcasting sent notice it would terminate all Canadian distribution rights for WGN America, effective January 1st, 2015. The move was likely done to comply with the CRTC genre protection rules that prohibited the use of general entertainment programming formats by domestic or foreign cable channels. The WGN-TV Chicago feed, however, remains authorized for domestic distribution as a superstation. It is carried on Bell Satellite TV Channel 1232 across Canada. Wow. And that's going to do it for episode number 35 of Television Station History, as we took a look at the long and vast history of WGN-TV, one of the nation's first national superstations. Alright, this has been a long one. It's been about 2 hours and 12 minutes since I started, so I'm about to sign off. But first, I want to remind you to stay tuned for episode number 36 of Television Station History. We'll be taking a look at WPWR-TV. That is coming up in episode 36, so make sure you join me for that. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell and get notified every time I go live. Big Al is signing off. Thanks for joining me on this long trip down memory lane with WGN-TV, and I will see you in episode number 36 of Television Station History. Peace out.